40 years waiting to go back home. But of course, there is no home for them anymore. Their lands have all been seized by Israelis. Their homes now have Jews living in them. They don't have their fields anymore. They don't have their businesses anymore. Somehow, these people have to be compensated. Now, what the Palestinians want is for them to be able to come back. But of course, we know that that's impossible. I mean, at the time, 40 years ago, they were barely 1 million people. 40 years later, they're now more than 5 million people. You can't just have 5 million people all of a sudden come back. It would completely destroy the infrastructure of the system. But what the Palestinians say is, okay, well then there has to be some sort of compensation. They have to be paid. They have to be paid for the land that they lost, for the homes that they lost. These 4 issues, 2 states living side by side, Jerusalem being split between them, West Jerusalem becomes the capital of Israel, East Jerusalem becomes the capital of Palestine, that Israel withdraws back to its 1967 borders. And let me just say one thing about this, by the way. Israel sometimes says, well, that's fine and everything, it's just that for 40 years we've been, in this occupied land. We can't just uproot. We have millions of people living in the West Bank. We can't just uproot them. In some cases that's true. So what the Palestinians have said is, okay then, you withdraw mostly to the 67 borders, and in those areas where you can't withdraw, we'll swap some land. You can keep that part, but you give us some land someplace else. So even this situation has been dealt with. And then the right of return, which is a sticky one. I mean, Palestinians, they get really, really passionate about this. It's a sticky one. They feel like, look, these people lost their homes. They were forced out of their land. They deserve to come back. But they also recognize that that's really not going to happen. So this compromise to this solution, this intractable problem, what do we do about this Israeli-Palestinian conflict that's been going on since 1948? What do we do about it? Well, the truth is that everybody knows what we do about it. In fact, since UN 242, remember we talked about that? This has been the law. And, even more interestingly, almost every single government in Israel and amongst the Palestinians has accepted this 2-state solution, this roadmap to the 2-state solution. For decades, this has been the answer to this problem. So what the hell? What's going on then? Why are we as far from creating this 2-state solution than we've ever been? Well, this is the question that President Obama was dealing with when he came into office. And he promised that unlike previous presidents, he was going to bring these 2 groups together and force them by the occupation. These settlements have gobbled up massive, massive amounts of, well, what was supposed to be the future Palestine. And in fact, that's their deliberate purpose. There's a phrase among certain Israeli politicians called facts on the ground. What they mean by that is, yeah, we're fine with the two-state solution. Not all Israeli politicians think this, but this is a pretty standard view in the Israeli political circles. We accept this situation, but the longer it takes to get this, the more of this land will be ours. So let's just sort of drag our feet. Let's take our time. What's the rush? There's no rush. You know, every day we're getting a little bit more. Every day it's going to be harder to remove us from this land. President Obama, of course, made a number of speeches. One in Cairo, made some huge promises here in the United States too, in which he said that he demands that Israel cease all settlement activity, all of it, now, without question. Even what Israel euphemistically refers to as natural growth. What they mean by that is that, look, we already have this settlement, we already have 100,000 people living in the settlement, but they're having children. So that settlement, we won't make any new settlements, but we have to expand this settlement. And Obama said, unlike any other president before him, no, absolutely not. I want an immediate, unconditional freeze of all settlement activity in order for us to come together and talk. So, from the Arabs, he got this promise. He demanded this promise for, peace in exchange for the two-state solution. And from the Israelis, he demanded this settlement. But something unusual happened. Something that people thought would happen, but no one actually, really was prepared for it. And that is that Israel basically told the president to go screw himself. And really, that's sort of the diplomatic, way of putting it. The Prime Minister of Israel, Benjamin Netanyahu, quite a radical himself, basically said, no. Now, the reason this is so shocking is that for decades, as you know, the United States has been the primary protector of Israel. Somehow we joke that Israel is the 51st state. We give Israel $3 billion a year. That's your money, the taxes that you pay to your federal government for your jobs. $3 billion of that every year goes to Israel. And of course, you're talking about, again, a first world country, not a third world country. So it was assumed that when the president of a nation that gives $3 billion to another nation